Agatha Christie, The Case of the Middle-Aged Wife. With 4 indignant grunts and an exasperated cry of a man can get no peace, followed finally by the slamming of the front door, Mr. Packington departed for the 8:45 a.m. London train. Mrs. Packington remained alone at the breakfast table. Her face was flushed and her lips trembled. She refrained from bursting into tears only because, at the last moment, her grief had been overtaken by a surge of pure anger. "I won't stand for it," she muttered. "I simply won't stand for it." A moment of brooding silence followed. Then, "Hussy, that's what she is. A sly, filthy little cat. And George, how can he be such an absolute idiot?" A sharp sense of loneliness, helplessness, and abandonment washed over her. Picking up the morning newspaper, her eyes drifted to a text on the front page that she had noticed several times before in the personal columns. "Are you happy? If not, consult Mr. Parker Pyne, 17 Richmond Street, London." "Nonsense," said Mrs. Packington aloud. "Absolute nonsense. And yet, after all, there is no harm in just looking." This explains why, at 10:30 that morning, a slightly agitated Mrs. Packington appeared at the private office of Mr. Parker Pyne. As previously noted, Mrs. Packington was somewhat nervous, but the mere sight of the detective restored her confidence. He was a large man, stout, one might even say, with a bald head of noble proportions and small, twinkling eyes behind thick-rimmed spectacles. "Pray, take a seat," Mr. Parker Pyne invited, coming to the aid of his embarrassed visitor. "You have come in answer to my advertisement?" "Yes." "So, you are unhappy," Mr. Parker Pyne began with brisk professionalism. "But then, few people are happy. You would be surprised to know how few happy people there are in this world." "Indeed?" Mrs. Packington asked, showing very little interest in the happiness or misfortunes of the rest of the world. "It does not interest you, I understand," Mr. Parker Pyne remarked. "But it interests me. You see, for 30 years of my life, I served as a statistician in a government office. Upon my retirement, I decided to apply the experience I had gained in a different way to the sphere of personal human lives. It is all very simple. Unhappiness can be classified under 5 main headings, no more, I assure you. And once you have diagnosed the cause of the disease, you can find the cure, can you not? I am, in a sense, a consultant. A doctor begins by finding out what is wrong with a patient's system and then prescribes a course of treatment. There are, however, cases where no treatment is of any use. If that is so, I say quite frankly that I could do nothing. But if I take a case, success is guaranteed. Was it possible? Was this nonsense, or could it be the truth? Mrs. Packington listened and watched the detective with growing hope. Smiling, Mr. Pyne asked, "Shall we proceed with the diagnosis?" He leaned back in his chair and brought his fingertips together in his habitual manner. "On the whole, your married life was happy. But now you are unhappy, and the cause of that unhappiness is your husband. His affairs are prospering, and I imagine that a young woman has appeared on his horizon, possibly someone from his office staff. A typist," Mrs. Packington said quickly. "Lipstick, silk stockings, and curls. That is all there is to it." Mr. Parker Pyne nodded. "It is nothing serious. I attach no importance to it. That is what your husband says, is it not?" "Yes, that is exactly what he says. Does he not suggest that he merely has a friendly interest in the young woman? Why shouldn't he bring a little light and joy into his rather monotonous existence? The poor girl is so sweet, so amusing. I imagine that is his attitude." Mrs. Packington nodded. "It is all deceit and pretense. He goes for outings on the river with her. I adore such outings myself, but for 5 or 6 years, he has kept telling me that it interferes with his golf. Yet for her, he gives up golf entirely. I love the theater, and he tells me he is too tired to go out in the evening. But with her, he goes off dancing and doesn't return until 3 o'clock in the morning. And no doubt he is shocked by your jealousy, since you are being jealous without any grounds, or so he claims. Mrs. Packington nodded again. Exactly. How did you know? The study of statistics, Mr. Parker Pyne replied simply. Oh, I am so miserable, Mrs. Packington said sadly. I have always been a good wife to George. I worked hard. I helped him get on his feet. I never looked at another man. I kept his things in perfect order. I fed him well. I managed the house economically. And now, just when he has become successful and we could finally enjoy life, this happens. Mr. Parker Pyne nodded somberly. I assure you, I understand your circumstances perfectly. She asked, almost in a whisper, and can you do anything? Naturally, dear lady. There is a treatment. Oh, yes, there is a treatment, he repeated. She fixed him with wide, expectant eyes. Mr. Parker Pyne answered calmly and firmly. You must trust me, and you must pay 200 guineas. 200 guineas. Quite so. You can well afford to spend such a sum. After all, had it been necessary, you would have paid as much for a surgical operation, would you not? And happiness is no less vital than physical health. But I will pay later. On the contrary, said Mr. Parker Pyne. Now, you must pay the fee in advance. Mrs. Packington rose from her seat. I am afraid I'm not prepared to buy a pig in a poke. Mr. Parker Pyne interrupted. Well, perhaps you are right. It is a large sum to risk. But listen to me. Trust me nonetheless. Take a chance on happiness. 200 guineas. Precisely. It is a significant amount. Make up your mind. But for now, good day, Mrs. Packington. If you change your mind, let me know. He shook her hand, smiling serenely. When she had gone, he pressed a buzzer on his desk. A plain-looking woman in spectacles entered. Miss Lemon, please open a new file, and tell Claude that I need him immediately. A new client? A new client. She is hesitating now, but she will certainly return. Probably this afternoon, around 4 o'clock. Schedule number 1? Naturally, schedule number 1. It is remarkable how everyone believes their own case to be unique. Now, warn Claude. Tell him that nothing exotic is required. No perfumes. And tell him to trim those long curls of his. At 4:15, Mrs. Packington reappeared at Mr. Parker Pyne's office. She took a checkbook from her handbag, filled out a leaf, and handed it to him. In return, she received a receipt. And now, she asked, looking at him with hope. And now, said Mr. Parker Pyne, smiling, return home. You will receive instructions by the first morning post, and I shall be happy if you carry them out. In a state of anxious anticipation, Mrs. Packington went home. Mr. Packington arrived, prepared to argue and defend himself, should the scene that had begun at breakfast continue. However, his wife was unusually pensive. Her combative mood had vanished, and he relaxed his guard. Listening to the radio, he wondered if dear Nancy would allow him to present her with a fur coat. He knew she was very proud, and he did not wish to offend her. But she had been complaining of the cold in her cheap little tweed coat, and it truly offered no protection. He must manage it so that she could not refuse. Soon they would meet again and spend the evening together. It was a pleasure to be seen with such a girl in a fine restaurant. Young men looked at him with envy. He had noticed it. She was exceptionally attractive, and she liked him. She didn't think him old at all. She had said so herself. Glancing over, he caught his wife's sigh, felt a pang of guilt, and immediately became irritated. This Mary, what a suspicious, narrow-minded woman. She begrudged him even this tiny crumb of happiness. He switched off the radio and went to bed. The following morning, Mrs. Packington unexpectedly received 3 letters. One informed her of an appointment with a beautician. Another, that she was to see a dressmaker. The third letter was from Mr. Pyne himself, inviting her to lunch that same day at the Ritz. At breakfast, Mr. Packington mentioned casually that he would likely not be home for dinner as he had a business engagement. She merely nodded with a distracted air. As he left, Mr. Packington congratulated himself. The domestic storm had passed him by. The beautician's manner was most imposing. "Oh, how you have let yourself go, madam. Why is that? You should have attended to this long ago. However, it is not yet too late." They set to work on her. The visit to the dressmaker was equally thrilling, leaving her feeling entirely modern, fashionable, and elegant. At 1:30, she met Mr. Parker Pyne at the Ritz. Calm and impeccably dressed, he was already waiting for her. "Charming," the detective declared, surveying her from head to foot with an expert eye. "I have ventured to order a white lady cocktail for us." Having no great fondness for cocktails, Mrs. Packington did not display any undue hesitation this time. Sipping the bracing liquid cautiously, she listened to the instructions of her benevolent mentor. "Your husband," Mr. Parker Pyne began, "needs a thorough jolt, Mrs. Packington." "Exactly that, a jolt. And to that end, I'm going to introduce you to a young friend of mine. He will invite you to lunch." Every day, as if by magic, a young man appeared. He looked around, noticed Mr. Parker Pyne, and approached the table. "Mr. Claude Luttrell, Mrs. Packington," said Mr. Parker Pyne, introducing them. Mr. Claude Luttrell appeared to be not yet 30. He was elegant, affable, perfectly dressed, and strikingly handsome. "Delighted to meet you," he murmured. Within 3 minutes, Mrs. Packington found herself seated at a table for 2, face to face with her new acquaintance. She felt a wave of self-consciousness, but Mr. Luttrell quickly set her at ease with tales of Paris and the Riviera, where he was a frequent traveler. He asked her, quite naturally, if she enjoyed dancing. Mrs. Packington admitted that she did, though she added that she rarely had the opportunity now, as Mr. Packington preferred to spend his evenings at home. "But he must not keep you immured within 4 walls. That is really too bad of him." Claude Luttrell flashed a smile, revealing a row of dazzlingly white teeth. "Modern women are under no obligation to tolerate a husband's jealousy." Mrs. Packington nearly confessed that jealousy was not the issue at all, but she checked herself just in time, deciding that jealousy was, in this instance, a very useful word indeed. Claude Luttrell lightly turned the conversation toward nightclubs, and it was settled that the following night they would grace a venue called the Junior Archangel. In anticipation of the moment she would have to announce this to her husband, Mrs. Packington felt quite nervous. She feared George would find it strange, or perhaps even ridiculous. She was so anxious at breakfast that she decided to say nothing for the time being. As it happened, a fortunate turn of events spared her the unpleasant explanation entirely. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, she was informed by telephone that her husband would be dining in town. That evening was a genuine triumph. In her youth, she had been an excellent dancer, and she quickly mastered the modern style thanks to Claude Luttrell's expertise. He praised her dress and her wonderful hair. She had, as instructed, visited the hairdresser that morning. Time at the club flew by unnoticed, and when the hour came to part, He kissed her hand with tender devotion. It had been a long time since Mrs. Packington had enjoyed such an enchanting evening. 10 thrilling days followed. She had breakfast with Claude Luttrell, drank tea, lunched, dined, and danced. She soon knew everything of his sad childhood and the unfortunate circumstances under which his father had lost his fortune. She knew of his tragic romance and the bitter outlook he now held toward women. On the evening of the 11th day, they went to dance at the Scarlet Admiral. Mrs. Packington spotted her spouse before he saw her. George was there with his young employee. Both couples were on the floor. When the orbit of the dance brought them close together, Mrs. Packington tossed out airily, "Hello, George." She was immensely amused by her husband's astonished face, first merely red, then turning a deep purple. It was a look of pure bewilderment mixed with a guilt that was now undeniable. Mrs. Packington enjoyed herself thoroughly, feeling like the mistress of the situation. Sitting down at her table, she began to observe. Poor old George! How stout he was, how bald, and how terribly he bounced. He danced according to a fashion 20 years out of date. Poor George, so desperately wanting to feel young. And that girl, poor thing, she was pretending to enjoy the dance, but her expression gave her away. To hide it from her partner, she buried her face against his shoulder. As for Mrs. Packington, she was the envy of the room that evening. She glanced at the flawless Claude, who maintained a tactful silence. How well he understood her. Not once did he wound her pride, a sin of which other husbands were so often guilty. She looked at George, then back at Claude, and their eyes met. The gaze of his beautiful, dark, romantically sad eyes was so tender as he smiled. "Shall we dance again?" he purred. And they danced, and it was divine. George followed them with a guilty gaze. She could feel it. It wasn't such a bad idea, making him jealous. It had been a long time since that had happened. Yet, truth be told, she did not really want him to worry. Why should he, poor man? Let everyone feel light-hearted and pleasant. When she returned, Mr. Packington had already been home for at least an hour. He appeared unsure of himself and deeply embarrassed. "So, you're back," was all he could find to say. Mrs. Packington threw off her evening wrap, for which she had paid 40 guineas only that morning, and replied with a smile, "Yes, as you see, I am back." George cleared his throat. "It was rather strange, running into you. Really, I thought it would be a nice thing to invite that girl out. She has a difficult life at home, and I thought that by doing a kind deed—" Mrs. Packington nodded understandingly. Poor George, bouncing on his little legs, bathed in perspiration, and still so full of himself. "Who is that fellow who is with you? I don't believe I know him." "His name is Luttrell." "Where did you meet him?" "Oh, some acquaintance or other introduced us," Mrs. Packington replied vaguely. "It's a rather odd notion at your age, going out dancing. You shouldn't act so recklessly, my dear." Mrs. Packington smiled. In that moment, she loved life too much to argue. So she said amiably, "Change is always pleasant, don't you find? You must be careful, my dear. These young idlers are everywhere. Do you know what they call them? Lazy lizards. Sometimes middle-aged women, like yourself, do foolish things and get caught on the hook. I'm just warning you. I wouldn't want you to behave in an unseemly manner." "I find that all lessons are useful," Mrs. Packington remarked. "Humph, well, yes. I hope you think so, too. The most important thing is to be happy, isn't it? I remember you saying that to me at breakfast about 10 days ago." Her husband looked at her searchingly, but there was not a shadow of sarcasm in her expression or her voice. She yawned. "I must go to bed. By the way, George, I've become quite a spendthrift lately. There are some terrifying bills coming in a day or two. You won't mind, will you? Bills? Oh, yes. For dresses, and massage, and hair treatments. I've become shamelessly extravagant, but I know you won't be angry. She moved toward the stairs leading to the bedroom, leaving Mr. Packington standing there with his mouth open. Mary had been surprisingly easygoing about everything regarding this evening. She simply hadn't paid any attention to his indiscretion. But it was regrettable that she had started squandering money. She, the very model of economy. Oh, women. George Packington shook his head, and his girl's brothers had got into some sort of trouble. Naturally, he had been glad to help. Oh, confound it all. His affairs were not in the best of shape. Sighing, Mr. Packington began to climb the stairs slowly. It often happens that the true meaning of words spoken a moment ago reaches us only later. It was not until the following morning that Mrs. Packington truly listened to what her husband had said the night before. Lazy lizards, middle-aged women, caught on the hook. Mrs. Packington possessed a brave heart, and she fearlessly faced the facts. Hired escorts, professional dancers. She had read about them in the newspapers. She had read of the follies of women in their late 30s. Did Claude belong to the lazy lizard type? It was beginning to seem so. On the other hand, such men were usually paid for, whereas Claude had always paid for her. Yes, but it was Mr. Parker Pyne who had provided the funds, and in all likelihood, it was her own 200 guineas. And what about herself? Was she perhaps just a middle-aged goose? Was Claude Luttrell mocking her behind her back? At this thought, her face burned. Well, then, if Claude was a professional escort, and she was the proverbial middle-aged lady, she ought to give him something. A gold cigarette case, perhaps, or something of that nature. In a state of agitation, she left the house, went to a jeweler's, chose a cigarette case, and set off for the Claridge restaurant, where Claude was waiting for her for lunch. When they reached the coffee stage, she took the case from her bag, murmuring, "A little gift." Frowning, he looked up at her. "Is this for me?" "Yes, I thought. I hope you like it." He covered the case with his palm and pushed it away with a flash of anger. "Why are you doing this? I don't want it. Take it back. Take it back, I say." His eyes flashed with resentment. "I'm sorry," she whispered, hiding the gift back in her bag. The old ease between them vanished. They said a strained goodbye. The next morning, he telephoned her. "I must see you. May I come this afternoon?" She told him she would be waiting for him at 3 o'clock. Claude arrived, looking pale and distraught. They greeted each other and sat down, but the tension remained. Suddenly, he sprang up and threw himself on his knees before her. "Mary, what do you think of me? I've come to ask you that. We become friends. But all the same, you think I'm a professional dancer. One of those types who live off women. A lazy lizard. Isn't that so?" No, I don't think that." He seemed not to hear her protest. His face grew even paler. "No, you do think it. And well, it's true. It's the truth. I was ordered to invite you, to entertain you, to make you fall in love with me, to make you forget your husband. It's my job. A despicable trade, isn't it? Why are you telling me all this? Because I'm finished with it. I can't go on. Because of you. You're not like the others. You inspire trust and admiration. Of course, you'll think these are just words, that this is part of my game too." He rose from his knees and came closer to her. "I'll prove you're wrong. I'm leaving because of you. I want to become a man again and stop being a loathsome animal." He embraced her impulsively and found her lips, then released her and stepped back. "Goodbye. All my life, I've been rubbish. Now everything will be different, I swear. Remember, you once said you liked looking at the personal advertisements in the morning paper. Every year on this day, you will find a message from me saying that I remember everything and that I'm keeping my word. Then you will understand what you mean to me. One more thing. I didn't want to take anything from you, but I want you to take one thing from me. He took a simple gold signet ring from his finger. It was my mother's ring. I should like you to keep it. Goodbye. With the ring resting in her palm, she stood motionless, utterly stunned. Arriving home early, George Packington found his wife by the fireplace, gazing into the embers with a distant, vacant look. "Look here, Mary," he began abruptly. "About that girl." "Yes, dear." Well, you see, I never intended for you to be upset over her. Believe me, the whole thing is of no consequence whatsoever. I know, I was being foolish. Continue seeing her as much as your heart desires, if it brings you joy." One might have expected these words to delight George Packington, but strangely enough, he felt only a sharp, unpleasant sting. What pleasure is there in taking a girl out if your own wife calmly encourages it? To the devil with it all. It was unseemly, after all. You imagine yourself as a lively dog, a strong man playing with fire, only to sizzle for a moment and then fade out ingloriously. He felt a sudden wave of weariness and suggested timidly, "Mary, perhaps we could go away somewhere together, if you'd like." "Oh, don't mind me. I am perfectly content. But I should like to take you somewhere. We could go to the Riviera, for instance." Mrs. Packington smiled at him from somewhere far away. Poor George. After all, she did love him, her dear, pathetic old man. "That will be lovely, my dear." In his office, Mr. Parker Pyne turned to Miss Lemon. "What did the expenses for the entertainment amount to?" £102, 40 shillings and 6 pence, Miss Lemon replied. The door to the office swung open with a violent shove, and Claude Luttrell walked in. He looked thoroughly morose. "Good morning, Claude," said Mr. Parker Pyne. "Did everything conclude satisfactorily?" "I suppose so." "And the ring? By the way, what name did you have engraved upon it?" "Matilda. The year 1899, Claude replied gloomily. "Brilliant. And the inscription?" "I keep my word. I remember everything." "Claude, note it down, if you please, Miss Lemon. Print the notice annually on the 3rd of November for—" "One moment, let me think. We have spent £102, 40 shillings and 6 pence. I believe we shall run it for 10 years. Our profit will stand at £92, 2 shillings and 4 pence. "Yes, quite correct." Miss Lemon left the room. "Listen," Claude suddenly erupted. "I don't care for this. It's a dirty game. My dear boy. Yes, a dirty game. She was a decent woman. To deceive her with such blatant lies. It makes me sick at heart." Mr. Parker Pyne adjusted his spectacles and stared at Claude with a sort of scientific curiosity. "Well, well," he remarked drily. "I don't recall your conscience troubling you even once throughout your, shall we say, previous activities. On the Riviera, you behaved with remarkable impudence when you exploited the wife of the California Cucumber King, Mrs. Katie West." "Whatever," Claude grumbled. "I'm beginning to think differently now." Mr. Parker Pyne changed his tone and began to soothe the young man. "You have performed a commendable deed, my dear Claude. Every unhappy woman craves a romantic story. All women crave them, without exception. Passion leads a woman to madness, and nothing good ever follows. But a romantic story remains in the memory for years, if not a lifetime, laid away in lavender like linen in a cupboard. I know human nature, my boy, and I assure you, such a memory will live in that woman's soul for many years to come." He cleared his throat. "I find that we have fulfilled our mission regarding Mrs. Packington quite satisfactorily." "I still don't like it," Claude muttered as he left his chief's office. Mr. Parker Pyne pulled a pristine folder from his desk drawer and inscribed the title of a new case. "A Curious Emergence of Conscience in a Lazy Lizard. Important. Follow development."